Members of the committee, members of the public and press, welcome to the continuation of the meeting of the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Panel Committee. I go to the Democratic Services Officer firstly to go through the housekeeping.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Bradley Road under the flyover. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be kind enough to go through items 1 and 2?
So, thank you, Chairman. Just to report that Councillor Jackie Edwards unfortunately is unable to attend due to family reasons.
Thank you. And substitute members, there are none. Well, there are plenty, but they're the same substitutes as the previous meeting. Declarations of interest. Councillors, thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for the purposes of transparency, it's a beach hut in Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 4. We've done public. Okay. Right. Agenda item 5. The commercialisation of beach hut assets through special purpose vehicle SPV, wholly or majority owned by the council. This item's already, of course, been the subject of some discussion at the July 20th meeting. The report to the committee advises that the council is no longer pursuing the commercialisation of the beach hut assets via an SPV. I obviously don't want to stifle debate, but would request that you do not repeat what's already been said. The Portfolio for Finance and Transformation, Councillor Mellor, is here to answer questions, and I think we'll take it from there. So does anybody want to start off? Councillor Mellor, perhaps you'd like to introduce the paper.
Happy to, Chair. Appreciate there was a reasonably lengthy discussion about this at the previous meeting. I think you've put it forward quite clearly in your introduction. We've now released a report alongside the original paper, so people can see where we've got to. There's very much a conversation with government throughout when we were looking to bring this forward, and then we had the changes in Secretary of State, which meant that some of the work we were doing with the previous Secretary of State was stalled. The new Secretary of State has obviously given a clarified guidance effectively, and that's actually changed the guidance in terms of flexible use of capital receipts policy. So this is something we were very much looking to do, are unable to do because of that change in guidance. So I think that's why the paper now clearly says that this is something that we are not going to proceed with, which is why I've asked for us to bring forward the medium-term financial plan update later, which I look forward to spending some time on, because that will make some material impact. Just remind people what we were trying to do. We didn't want to, we need to fund transformation, we need to be ambitious about our transformation plan. We've made a case to government repeatedly that we should be able to effectively borrow directly for transformation. We've got a one-year payback period for that. That wasn't within the regulations. We didn't have the capacity to do that, despite we'd asked for that since 2019. Hence, we came with a plan around securitisation of the beach huts. Ultimately, government has decided, because we were clear we didn't want to sell any assets, and this was not a sale of beach huts, because effectively we've been selling it to a special purpose vehicle we would have 100% owned. It didn't meet with the spirit of the regulations, so we've now been able to move forward with government a different plan around how we're going to fund our assets, fund our transformation programme without selling our assets. So I look forward to discussing that in the MTFP section later, Chair. Thank you.
Before I go to questions, can I just say that I intend to invite new questions and comments from the committee, from members of this committee first, and then go to any other members in the room or on Teams who request to speak after that. So, who's the...
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the leader why he didn't turn up on the 20th of July to answer the questions that we wanted to put to him, provide the clarification of the lead, rather than us having to have it drip fed to us through the local media, through the Echo the following week, when the information was already available? I would also like to ask the leader of the council why he wasn't more forthcoming in the information, given that he'd already been in communication with the minister on this matter, and that information was available and could have been relayed in response to questions that were asked on the 20th of July. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to answer that. Thank you very much. So a couple of points there. So I think we were very much in, particularly at that point, an exact point, fluid discussions with the department. We'd had some in-depth discussions with Michael Gove and his SPAD team around what the pitch we made, which was we shouldn't have to come up with interesting ways of creating capital receipts. We should be able to borrow directly for transformation. That absolutely stalled when the change in Secretary of State, and we had to pick up a new discussion with the Secretary of State to get some guidance about what approach was out of those two options: either you move forward with an SPV type proposal, securitisation proposal, or get some new flexibility to borrow for transformation, as was the case in earlier elements of local government reorganisation. So that was a very fluid discussion, and that's, and in terms of your point around what information was available, what we had directly was a letter from Kemi Badenoch that said that the beach had confirmed that the beach hut SPV was within the regulations. What they challenged was whether it's in the spirit of the regulations, and that they would be doing some consultation on that. So again, we didn't have clarity from government at that point as to which best way to proceed, but we've got that now, and that's why we're happy to be here to discuss it.
I'll come back on that, please, Chair. With respect, Councillor Miller, I didn't ask why didn't he turn up on the 20th to explain this to us in response to our questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'd had some element of discussion with Monitoring Officer, Chairman of Committee of Democratic Services, around how that meeting would, the fact that it was the wrong time to be discussing that meeting. I think we'd said quite clearly that what we needed to do was to pause and go to the next, wait until we had further information, and at that point was to do it properly. At that point, the discussion would have been, it would have been impossible to have had that discussion, because we were discussing and negotiating with government what the right strategy would have been. So my understanding was that meeting would be, the sensible thing for that meeting to do was to close it off and bring it back later, and I was under the impression that that's what would have happened, hence why I didn't come.
One more.
Was that a preferable way forward, given that it was all drip fed to us through the press the following week? Was that really a responsible thing? When that information could have been relayed, we could have had a reasonable discussion about the developments, and instead what we were confronted with was the Conservative Party whip closing the meeting down at the first opportunity, prior to there was any opportunity to ask and get responses to the questions that we asked. In fact, it was a disgraceful exhibition.
I disagree with that, Councillor Bartlett, because the meeting had over an hour's worth of discussion on the debate. I believe it was moved earlier that the meeting should be closed down, and then it further debate was allowed. So I disagree with you, and I come back to the point that it was very fluid negotiation discussion with government, and it's only been more recently that has been crystallised positively with government. So again, I do not agree that meeting was the best time to discuss that paper, which is what we quite clearly said.
Chair, I did also ask the chief exec to explain why officers weren't able to come forward with answers to the questions that were put at the time of the meeting, please.
I think I've answered that question. It's a very fluid discussion. It's the wrong time to have to paper.
Sorry, the answer to the question was addressed to the chief exec, please. Thank you.
Chief Exec.
Sorry, Chairman, I wonder if Councillor Bartlett could just be specific as to which questions weren't answered for me, just to remind me.
We were trying to understand what was happening in terms of the beach huts proposal, and that's what we were looking for. How was it being developed? And it was clear that officers would have been associated with the discussions that the leader was having with the ministry, and at the meeting I did say that it was clear that officers would have been aware of some of the issues. And the question I had was put, can officers please explain what's going on? I think that question was deflected somewhat by the monitoring officer at the time, but it now materialises, and you've got to remember at the time we didn't know what you knew. We knew nothing. We knew nothing. But officers did know a lot more than they were prepared to say. And I think that it was disingenuous not to offer the information that you held at that time. And I believe it would have been, and we wouldn't be here now discussing this information in this way had that discussion gone through its normal course.
Can I just remind everybody that questions through the chair?
Thank you, Chairman. And my recollection is that there were no direct questions put to officers at that time. I think in the meeting, any questions that were put were answered, but I generally don't believe that there were any direct questions asked of officers in that way. So we absolutely, as officers, we will always answer openly and honestly. I don't believe there were any questions that were put directly to the officers. I was watching the meeting remotely. I know that Mr. Richards and Mr. Nice were here for the meetings. I don't believe there were any questions directly put. It's always difficult as officers as to when to intervene or when to offer. I generally don't believe that we got to that position in the meeting. If we did, and Councillor Bartlett expected an intervention, then I apologise for that on behalf of all of the officers.
Councillor Moore, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could ask a question to Adam, I think, please, and I want to go back to the budget. So, as I understand it, Council agreed the budget for 2022-2023 this February, and the beach hut proposal was part of this budget and was to give the Council 54 million to fund transformation. I note there was advice from KPMG from a report on commercialisation of assets, because that was in the pack. It's dated 22nd of February. However, Council was also told this proposal was acceptable to government. But where is the evidence regarding the acceptability of this proposal by government? And I'm asking because there's no written evidence in this pack. However, Council was consistently told that the government was supportive. So when did you ask government if this proposal was acceptable, and what and where is the evidence regarding the acceptability of this proposal? And I apologise for asking you when you're sitting behind me, because you're just sitting my back. I do apologise for this.
Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. If I can refer the Councillor to the budget report that was issued in February 2022, in particular to section 78 and 79 of that report. 78 of that report states that the Council has been supported in this matter by KPMG. The model has been referred to SIT for consultancy and the external auditor for their consideration. A separate formal report will be brought forward to Council for approval in the first quarter of 2022 financial year, following future further due diligence, including a value for money assessment. Early, without prejudice feedback recognises the reasonableness of the financial aspects of the proposal. So that was clearly set out within that budget report. As you've seen from all the subsequent correspondence from government, the government were very clear that the proposal was not prohibited by the regulations. However, after government considered, I think, long and hard the proposal, they came to the judgment that it wasn't in line with the spirit and intent.
Councillor Farquhar, I understand you have a question. Yes, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as you say, I can read that in the report around the budget. But we were told at the time that government was supportive, and it's quite clear now, I think, that no decision had been made by government, and all that, and there was no supportive announcement at all. It wasn't so much that the government changed its mind as that the government never supported it in the first place. That is my concern. Its entire budget was predicated on government support, which wasn't actually forthcoming. That's my concern. Thank you.
Mr. Richards, do you want to answer this, or do you?
Thank you very much, Chair. I understand where the question is coming from. I do. I disagree with how with effectively what it is. We're saying that we had confirmed in the budget paper that government were supportive. What we'd confirmed in the budget paper, as Adam Richards has written out, was that we'd done some work with KPMG in terms of the senior, local government's finance specialist. We then tested that with SIPFA, and we tested that with Grant Thornton, our external auditor, and that's what we put in the budget report. And all of those bodies said, without prejudice, that this fits with the spirit, not the spirit, we weren't testing that, fits with the regulations of the flexible use of capital receipts. We then had that confirmed in Kevin Badenoch's letter, but effectively it does. And they've had to then change the rules to make sure it doesn't. So effectively, we never said that the government had signed it off. We said that it fitted with the regulations as they were written. We'd done a very diligent process to do it. It was entirely in line with the flexible use of capital receipts regulations. Deluxe have confirmed that, and they then consulted on whether it should be, and subsequently they changed it and worked with us to come up with a more preferable solution for us. Something that this council, including the Unity Alliance administration, was asking for back in 2019 around having the ability to borrow to fund transformation cleanly. That's what we've achieved, and that's what's in the medium-term financial paper, and that's what I believe we should be moving on to be of more fruitful discussion. But I hope that clarifies what was and what wasn't in the report.
Sorry, Councillor Farquhar.
Saying it right, Chair. Sometimes I think it's evident that Councillor Mallon forgets what he actually said in the chamber, and he forgets the implied meaning of what he actually says. An example of that, if you please, Chair, is that at the beginning of the opening preamble by Councillor Member Mellor, he said that the case was made to borrow to fund transformation since 2019. Could I just ask why it is that Councillor Mellor said that statement? I have further questions.
We probably should make sure we don't drift into the next meeting, but Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, happy to. I have awareness that I wasn't the leader of council in 2019. I do believe conversations were going. It says in the report quite clearly in the medium-term financial plan report that conversations were in asking government as far back as 2019. I would suggest that either Graham Farrant or Adam Richards would probably be better placed as being in those discussions at the time to answer that question. But I'm absolutely clear this is what this council wanted to happen in 2019. It's what we said, and actually effectively by work from our officers and Deluxe have now been able to deliver for the first time.
Chief Executive, do you want to come in?
I certainly was in discussions with senior civil servants during 2019 around the options for funding transformation. I do believe that if you're doing a merger, you ought to be able to fund the costs of the merger properly. And actually, given the finances of BCP Council, as it then was, we were always asking whether we could borrow to fund transformation from capital. So we had those conversations. We had them with a number of civil servants. We won't name them, but there's one who was well known to many members. I think at that time they were not supportive of the of that way of funding it.
Councillor Farquhar, you have a further question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a clarification then from the Chief Executive that the government in 2019 were not supportive of borrowing for transformation. Could that just be confirmed?
Chief Executive.
We did not make a formal application and therefore get a formal response, but in informal conversations they were not supportive.
Thank you, Chair. That kind of answers my question as regards why Councillor Miller and his administration continues to proceed with the SPV and their, as been described by the Secretary of State, their dodgy deals that only benefit accountants and consulting firms. My next question is, because Councillor Miller replied to Councillor Bartlett to the question why you were not here on the meeting of July 20th. Councillor Miller replied that he was in discussion with the chair, yourself, Chair, the monitoring officer, and that to his understanding the meeting wasn't going to proceed. Could I ask the leader why it is that if he was under that understanding, the other Conservative members of this committee were all there on that particular evening and he wasn't?
Yeah, it's a convened meeting of a council. Members of the committee are summoned to attend that meeting, and they did so as they should and did, and then allowed the debate to proceed, which is exactly what they should have done.
If I may, Chair, my question was why were they here and he wasn't? Because he said, to his understanding, the meeting wasn't going to proceed. So therefore, my question is, if his councillors were aware it was convened and was going ahead, why was Councillor Miller not here?
Yeah, I didn't say that I didn't pick the meeting. If I did say I was incorrect, if the meeting wouldn't proceed. What I did say is that it was obviously not the right time to be discussing any of the information in that, because it was fluid. We have to publish our papers significantly in advance, but in that overlap period, the situation changed materially. So I didn't expect the meeting. The meeting was called and it was summoned. It had to happen, and therefore members of that committee had to attend. I did not see value in us discussing something we didn't have any clarity on at that point. Hence, I did not think it was useful for me or for council to attend that meeting. What I had was a discussion with the chair of the committee, who'd said to me, gave me some advice around how best to proceed and whether we should bring this back in the future and convene a special meeting of a committee again. And as we're here tonight again with another special meeting of the committee after this meeting, I think we're showing we're very happy. We're looking forward to being involved in overview and scrutiny, but you've got to have something to scrutinise, and at that point we had absolutely nothing to scrutinise. So hopefully that clarifies your question, Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. What it does clarify to me is that Councillor Miller forgets what he's actually said within the space of an actual paragraph itself. Councillor Miller just confirmed to us that he did not see the value in this committee sitting to scrutinise the actions of Councillor Miller and the officers in regard to the business which was formally called. Can I ask my next question now, please?
Please.
I'm really interested in the letter which has been referred to earlier, Chair, of the 16th of June sent by the Minister. May I ask who that was addressed to and who it was addressed to, what immediate actions and who did they share the contents of that letter with, and at what point in time after the receipt of that letter dated the 16th of June?
Leader.
It's in the pack, so anybody who had to see who that addressed to, I believe that was addressed to me. It would have also been sent copies sent to officers. We would have immediately picked up a conversation around implications of that. Separately, I had a political conversation with the Secretary of State and maybe spend some more time with him in Harrogate at the RGA conference to discuss an option around this. And I repeated, and as I had said to Robert Jenrick when I met him to discuss the matter, that I believe we need to councils need to be ambitious about transformation. We've already saved £50 million a year. We need to be able to save another 50, but we need to be able to fund it. And it's not in the right interest of local government to ask, give them flexibility, yes, but not force them to sell their assets, which will undermine their long-term financial sustainability. So at the point of receiving that letter, we had political discussions with various ministers, and we had officer discussions about the actions as we were trying to come forward with some clarity. And at that point, it was not the pitch we were making was allow us to either proceed through the flexible use of capital receipts as is through the SPV, or allow us to borrow directly for transformation, which we are now have been given an indication that we're able to do. Because of the change in minister, that had that discussion, as I've said 3 or 4 times now, Chair. So apologies if I'm boring you. Was in flux. So. But they were the outcomes of us receiving that letter.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate that reply on behalf of the committee. It's a pleasure to actually have Councillor Mellor here to actually answer questions, and in no way, shape or form is he boring the committee. I'm sure he's not boring you, Chair, but it's actually a mark of disrespect that he actually shows this committee and scrutiny as a whole. So my further question, if I please. Well, if I may, Chair,
one more,
because I'm asking.
But
there is a follow-up question to that one. It's important to establish the facts.
Would you allow the leader to come back on what you just said? Yes.
Can I ask my question first?
No.
Thank you very much, Chair. So effectively, you just said disregard for scrutiny, which is absolute nonsense. We were having a discussion about that was in a special meeting of scrutiny, which it's absolutely supported and encouraged. We've had another special meeting of scrutiny this evening to talk about the medium-term financial plan. That is something I personally brought forward by 4 weeks because I wanted to have the opportunity to bring it to this committee today, which absolutely shows how important I believe scrutiny is and my attendance when we've got something to discuss, which is now. Scrutiny isn't about what's not going to happen. Scrutiny isn't about stuff that you're not going to do. Scrutiny is about stuff you are looking to do, and that's and the situation we are in, and reporting back on that, and that's exactly why I believe passionately in scrutiny, and I'm really pleased through your leadership, Chairman. We've now had 2 extra meetings of scrutiny, which shows that you obviously share my passion for scrutiny.
One last question from Councillor Farquhar before we move on to Councillor Slade.
Absolutely, I'm very keen that others have an opportunity to question Councillor Mellor on his actions and what his intentions were and what is or isn't going to happen within his own perspective and mind. The follow-up question which I had for a matter of clarity is that Councillor Mellor said that he was going to have, he was having political conversations with the Secretary of State. There's 2 parts to this question. The first part is, can he confirm who the Secretary of State was at that time that he had those political discussions? The reason I ask it, because there is a lot of changes, and I think that is a severe bearing on the actual case that Councillor Mellor is making for why the SPAV has actually failed. My other part of the question is the letter of the 16th. Now, he said it was addressed to Councillor Mellor and our officers. He had discussions with our officers. May I ask, at what point did he share the contents and the implications of the letter of the 16th of June with his own cabinet?
Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of discussions we have had a number of, I have not been the leader of his council for 2 years, and I've had the pleasure of having discussions with three secretaries of state in that time. To each of them, I have made the point in conversation that to back us as an exemplar in terms of local government reorganisation, and to the fact that we've already saved £50 million and we have a plan to save a further £50 million. And I've said to each 3 of those that what we would appreciate you do is having the flexibility to be able to borrow directly for the transformation, which, as you've seen in the update today, we're pretty much delivered. And I've said to each of them that alternatively we'll look for give us more flexibility to use our assets creatively, which is what we've done. because we believe, and I believe, in small state low tax, and we've already delivered £11 million of tax savings to council taxpayers. I'll just remind you of that. Now we're looking at the cost of living crisis and the depth of it that we're in at the moment. So this council, my colleagues, this administration has delivered £11 million of savings to council taxpayers because we didn't just roll over and say, let's just sell all our assets and put council tax up to the maximum. So I'm absolutely proud of what my administration has done, and the fact that we're standing up and having those conversations with ministers. And as you'll see from the letter we received today, they're bearing fruit. In terms of my cabinet, I have an informal cabinet meeting every Monday with cabinet, so it would have been shared in the normal course of business, an update through that.
If I may, Chair,
No.
I asked a specific question: who was the Secretary of State?
All three of them.
The Councillor Mellor didn't say at that date who it was. They had the political discussion with following the letter of the 16th of June. I think it's important to establish that, because I don't think Councillor Mellor knows who he's speaking to.
Well, he just did answer you actually, but he wanted to.
I just say, in terms of that answer, that specific letter, the Secretary of State was Michael Gove. Thank you.
Councillor Slade.
Thank you very much for that. Apologies in advance if I'm coughing. I'm absolutely gobsmacked by some of what I've heard. So can I just start with a bit of clarity? Your £11 million that you have saved, no. £11 million that you didn't charge in council tax has nothing to do with transformation. Transformation was only going to cost £35 million under the previous administration, which would have been funded through sale of assets and reserves. It was not being funded through borrowing. There may have been conversations in the early days about whether that might have been a possibility, but it was never part of the proposal. It was proper, sensible, controlled sale of non-strategic surplus assets and earmarked reserves that were set aside for that very purpose, which you have thrown away, and you have decided not to have a fire sale. Funny enough, you are now going to have a fire sale because of the government. Irony is not lost on any of us. Some clarity over some of the things you said, Councillor Mellor, because I don't think you do know about your dates. You said you were having conversations with Michael Gove and his SPAD team. We have asked, and I know officers have asked, and I'm very happy to ask officers again if you can't answer. There is no evidence anywhere on the council email system of any correspondence between you and the ministers or civil servants about this up until the letters from Kevin Badenoch. You also said that you were looking to get borrowing for transformation, and this stalled with the new Secretary of State. Can you confirm for me, who was it that you said it stalled with? It stalled with which Secretary of State?
Yeah, okay, so a few things to that. So first of all, let's go to council tax and transformation. So £11 million, whether it was charged or not charged or saved, in every other budget, if we'd not put two council tax freezes that we had done, we would have taken an extra £11 million out of people's pockets in this conurbation. So that's £11 million we through our budget, through our financial strategy, we have saved. So there's £11 million as a matter of fact in our residents' pockets because of the actions of this administration. Also, that figure will grow every year. That figure will grow. And I know you're quite clearly on record, and you've said it, and you've been in the press saying it. We should have put council tax up. Great. I think we've got a really clear choice at the next election. You've got a Conservative administration and the Conservative Party who are going to fight for low tax, small state government, and we're going to deliver it because we've already delivered it. We've already put £11 million, which will grow every year, into residents' pockets. So have a very clear choice: high tax under Vicky Slade and the Liberal Democrats and Unity Alliance, or a small state low tax under us, which we've delivered, and you're on record saying something different. Let's talk about transformation now, which you should be aware of because it was your portfolio as the leader. We've moved forward massively in terms of our ambition, in terms of transformation delivery. So you were looking to spend in the £30 million for it. We want to spend more because we want to deliver more. So we've moved. Well, that's not a lie actually, because we've moved.
It is a lie.
So can I, if you don't, Chair, would you like to say anything, or would you like me to carry on?
I think that's a bit strong, if you don't mind.
The transformation programme is still going to cost about 37 million. The difference is because the leader, and I will happily ask the Section 151 officer for clarity, the difference of an extra 21 million is because he's rolling up revenue costs of staff, members of staff who are not for transformation, they are everyday members of staff. He's rolling £7 million of their salaries in for 3 years. That is not ambition.
Councillor Slade, the reason I interrupted was that that's not the right language to use.
He has misled the committee again, and I won't withdraw that because the transformation programme itself is not more ambitious. It's grown, it's ballooned because he's adding more and more and more because he's spent all the money. And if he didn't add this, he wouldn't actually be able to balance the budget in February. But none of that is relevant because I'm talking about who did he speak to?
It is relevant because you asked me the question, so I appreciate being able to answer it.
Well, actually, no, it's not relevant because you haven't answered the question.
Well, yeah, because you said that my answers were in fact a lie, which is incorrect. And let me help you explain to you. So the budget had the transformation had a £43 million worth of projected savings. We've now moved that to in the region of 50 million. So we've added an extra £7 million of savings, recurring savings, into the budget. On top of that, we've also started programmes which you'll see in the papers in front of you around the capitalisation direction, when we've added extra money for children's and adults transformation, because we're looking to drive materially more out of children's and adults transformation. So we've added a service-based transformation layer. So we've done two things. We've added an extra £7 million to the original transformation project, and we've added significant savings in and around children's and adults, which are material. So we are looking to spend more money. We have found different ways to put some of the costs of the council, which are spending their time on transformation, so we can deliver that. And we've done that, and we're funding that not through selling assets, not through having a fire sale of assets, but having a direct conversation with government and getting government to deliver for us in terms of that. So I would like Councillor Slade to take back the fact that she's called me a liar, because I've proven she's incorrect on that. We've increased the transformation spend and we've increased the transformation output because we are more ambitious about transformation. Why are we more ambitious about transformation? Because we are going to deliver small state low tax, and that is a clear choice at the next election. You also asked me a question. You also mentioned about we did.
Can I just pause you for a moment, Mr. Richards? You wanted to add something to this.
Chair, if I can come in and maybe to help with the debate, the transformation programme, as set out in the budget report, has moved to £68 million, 67.86 to be precise, and that includes £20.09 million, which is costs of staff that were employed by the authority that are working on the transformation programme at £6.7 million per year in the next 3 years. So that is the most significant reason for the increase within the 22-23 budget for the transformation programme.
Perhaps Adam Richards will also comment in terms of the fact that we've now added an extra layer of service-based transformation in to clarify the point that I was making to Councillor Slade, and we've also got a line in the MTFP around moving forward from the original £43 million limit, because effectively I've been called a liar. Adam Richards will be able to confirm what the case is.
So I can confirm that the budget report sets out the intent to invest in the adults and children service layer as referred to by the leader, but that wasn't approved as part of the budget report. The actual MTFP, however, does include an assumption of £7.2 million for the financial year, I think it's 25-26, after the substantive transformation programme has been completed.
So quite clearly a more ambitious programme around transformation, which I would like the Councillor Slade to reflect on her accusation.
I am very happy to reflect on with a question to the Section 151 officer through you, Chair.
Please.
I understand that additional £7.5 million, which is due to be delivered in the tax year 25-26, will come directly by further reducing the number of full-time equivalent staff, in addition to the £22.6 million, which we're looking to save by the loss of 624 staff from the baseline when we started this. My understanding is that actually we need to save a lot more than that in numbers of staff, because we now employ more staff than we did when we started, despite a commitment to reduce staff. So could Mr. Richins please confirm that that £7.5 million additional, so that Councillor Mellor could be able to say we're saving 50 million a year, because that sounds far better than 42.5 million, is after transformation has completed, we are going to lose an additional £7.5 million worth of staff. Could he please confirm that?
Mr. Richards.
Chair, I'm in a position to confirm, as set out in the budget report, that for the financial year 25-26, there is an assumption of a £7.2 million saving that is headed, following transformation, further net FTE reductions.
So we can confirm that's additional staff which has been dreamt up to make it hit 50 million. To go back to the original point, and I'm not going to keep arguing with Councillor Mellor over our different principles, because fundamentally, okay, he's not going to have a choice about putting the council tax up shortly, because the government are going to enforce it, because we are almost bankrupt. The question I asked was, Michael Gove and the SPAD team, with no evidence of any discussions having taken place, because there are no emails on record, so where are those emails? He was talking to about borrowing for transformation. This stalled with the new Secretary of State. Let me help him. Michael Gove stopped being Secretary of State in September 2021. He had a letter from Kemi Badenoch on the 16th of June 2022. She took office in September 2021, at the same time as Michael Gove. So we had Robert Jenrick was the Secretary of State until September 2021. Michael Gove became Secretary of State in September 2021. He was sacked on the 6th of July 2022. Kemi Badenoch was part of his team. Kemi Badenoch told Councillor Mellor that his idea was ridiculous. It may well be legal, but it was not in the spirit of things. And that was clarified in a more strongly worded letter by Mr. Scully and then by Greg Clark, directly calling BCP Council doing dodgy deals, which is the far opposite of exemplar. In the meantime, discussions were had with the LGA on the 6th of July, during which they specifically told us that the decision to go ahead with a beach hut transaction should be reconsidered urgently, and that basically we were one step away from bankruptcy. I'm clearly not going to get an answer on any of that, but I want to go back to the timing. The question is, you couldn't answer which Secretary of State, so I've just answered it for you. It didn't stall because the Secretary of State actually changed in September 2021. So why is it that in June of 2022 you started saying there's been a change of minister when the change of minister happened in September 2021? That's the question.
That's really quite a simple one to answer. So, so I had an initial discussion with Robert Jenrick, and then he was removed as Secretary of State in I'm sure you're right, September 21. Then we had a post receiving the letter from Kemi Badenoch, largely as far as in Harrogate. Had a conversation with Michael Gove, who was the Secretary of State when I was having those discussions directly with him and with his SPAD team. Again, as I've said about the two options, with one is allow us to have a flexibility to fund transformation as we were doing, or allow us the ability to borrow from it. At the point that he was removed as Secretary of State on the 6th of July 22, that is the point I'm referring to, which is in terms of the discussion has stalled. We had a new Secretary of State, had to have a discussion with them around that, and that effectively, and Greg Clark has made his position really clear on that. What Greg Clark's also done is worked, and his team have worked tirelessly with us to deliver, in amazing pace, our request on the other side of that that pitch effectively. One around allow us to do, use our assets like SPVs, or let us borrow, and he's going to let us borrow to do it, which is great. Which means we've delivered something you weren't able to deliver. We've delivered something that doesn't deliver a fast sale of assets for us, which will make sure we're much more financially sustainable in the future.
I've got the remaining questions, please.
All right.
Yeah. Didn't deliver the file sale yet. You'll be doing that shortly, I believe, if you read the letter from the government. I don't know if you've ever read the definition of fire sale, but it's a sale of assets to avoid bankruptcy, which we obviously didn't need a fire sale. Just let's talk about the timeline, because I need to get something clarified. I wonder if you could just confirm whether any of this is incorrect. The council approached KPMG in April 2021 to look at the commercialisation and release of assets, 6 months after saying that there would be no asset sales. The first report was done by KPMG in August 2021 and presented in September 2021. That report led to a request to actually look at commercialisation of beach huts, during which time, of course, Michael Gove, the new Secretary of State, is still very excited about the idea of you borrowing for transformation. In October 2021, there was a workshop with KPMG, and that led in November 2021 to a second report written by KPMG, which was all completed in November 2021, but for some reason nobody can explain, remained draft until July 2022. We know why, because it meant that we couldn't see it. That report was completed in November 2021, adjusted for interest rates in February 2021. In February 2022, you told us in a meeting there is categorically no report. Fact, it's on record. In March 2022, there was a meeting with Beach Hut representatives during which it was confirmed, and I have the transcript, that the report from KPMG was about to be released within a few weeks. It took until July 2022 before that report was released, apparently because it was draft, apparently because KPMG didn't want us to see it. Discussions took place with the Secretary of State, who said this is a bad idea. On the same day as the new Secretary of State went in, discussions with LGA said, you are completely mad, this can't go ahead. On the 20th of July, you deemed not to come here to a meeting, which is incredibly disrespectful to the residents who had asked questions, even if it's not disrespectful to us. On the 27th of July, I am asking you whether all of this is correct. On the 27th of July, you told Radio Solent that you would go ahead with the plan. Is any of that information incorrect?
Chair, I've been absolutely clear as committee that we would look forward to funding transformation and our extra ambitions in terms of transformation, and we would look at any ways we could to do that whilst delivering low council tax and making sure we maintain our assets. So there were a number of reports, that pieces of work that KPMG did, and I've been clear, the chief executive's been clear, your officers have been clear, the monitoring officer will be clear as well, that at the points where any of those statements were made, they're absolutely factually correct. So I'm struggling to work out what effectively your question is.
Before you speak, Mr. Richards, you wanted to come in.
Chair, I'm not going to disagree with the timeline from Councillor Slade, but can I just point out a factual inaccuracy within the first bit? My understanding is that the first report from KPMG did not propose beach huts as a securitisation as a way forward. It was only following the workshop and the production of the second report that actually then entered the environment for consideration.
Thank you for that.
I'm very grateful for that, because you're absolutely correct, it didn't mention it. Thank you. That does help me with the next question, which is, Councillor Mellor, whose idea was it to sell the beach huts? Because it clearly wasn't part of the first KPMG report. Can you tell me what was the role of Future Places in all of this?
Yeah, two questions there. So you've got the first question is whose idea was this? As an administration, we've been quite clear with our officer team that we wanted to deliver solutions, as I've said before, but didn't have a fire sale of assets that you were going to. You said today you were going to sell a load of assets and you're going to use reserves. So we've put those reserves to better use in terms of cleaner, greener, safer, in terms of reduced council tax, in terms of the summer readiness. We put extra millions of pounds in. We had the ability to do that because we changed your plan and we used those reserves, those revenue resources where we should do. And we've seen the benefit of that. And if you look at the summer we've had from the last 2 years compared to the summer under your leadership, it's been much stark contrast. We've done that whilst delivering £11 million back in council taxpayers' pockets. So whose idea it was, we had discussions with officers. We decided to have a conversation with our transformation partner to see other ways of using our assets. In that conversation, as Councillor Richardson said, were officers, myself as a Conservative politician, and there would have been one member of Future Places in there, because we're largely looking at how we could use regeneration assets. You know, the assets we've got, we either sell them or we use them for regeneration. So that was the team. Through that meeting, we discussed various options, including securitisation was one of them, and in further meetings and through further work, when we looked at actually securitising the income stream. One thing you did say is, like, when you're trying to sell the beach huts, the reason we've not been able to do what we were looking to do is because it wasn't the sale of the beach huts. We were adamant we didn't want to sell the beach huts, because this administration isn't going to be selling the next generation's assets, which is exactly what you wanted to do. What we're going to do is to use them for regeneration, because we believe in BCP. We believe it should be one of the best places in the UK, if not the world, to be, and we're putting the resources in place to do that, including our Future Places team, which is absolutely fantastic mechanism for delivering for this connovation.
I'd like one for the leader. I had so many more things I would say, but
yes.
frankly, it's a waste of time. My final question to the leader, and this is a very, very simple one. Does he regret the fact that this has caused this council huge embarrassment for the whole of the local government family to now know that BCP is known for dodgy deals, and the risk that it's put, or whether this council will be able to secure future funding under your leadership, and is he going to resign?
Thank you very much for that question. So, am I embarrassed? I'll tell you what, I'm not embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed about standing up and delivering small state, low tax, for our residents, putting £11 million in people's pockets at a time when they desperately need it. That's what we've done. That's what we've delivered. And if I've got to fight for that every day for residents of BCP, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Then we look at what we've actually delivered the ability to borrow through transformation without selling our assets, without using our revenue resources to fund it, to capitalise something with effectively an 18-month payback period. So am I? Well, of course it's 18 months, because let me do the maths here. If it's about 75 million and we're going to make £50 million a year, that happens to be 18 months. So as a payback period, so absolutely categorically, I am proud of what we're delivering. I'm proud of our record over the last 2 years. We are one of the only councils in the country that's delivered back-to-back council tax freezes. Now that looks like a better decision than ever. Our residents need that money in their pockets, and you can trust a Conservative administration to keep it in their pockets. That's exactly what we're going to do.
Okay. Councillor Iyengar, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just it's a couple of observations, but I will try and sort of turn them into questions. The whole of the past, if I say the past 8 months and earlier, is kind of, this is a whole solemn episode, I have to say. And if I may, I think the tone of this meeting should actually reflect the kind of the sort of the serious and the solemnity of where we are with this, between ourselves and also nationally as well. If good comes out of bad, it's helpful to reflect on what's happened. Sometimes, one can't be sort of too clever, and with hindsight, we know that. But on the other hand, look back and think about what things reasonably should have been known, anticipated, foreseen, or made doubly clear at the time, so that where we are right now wouldn't have happened. I think I will make one point with some feeling. I think this idea that we were seeking clarity from government and that clarity came is a kind of a stance that just won't help us at all going forward. Because I've seen, and like many, I've just seen at an arm's length, what's gone on in the correspondence. I see through the 3 letters from the the 2 ministers and then the Secretary of State.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor, but is there a question?
If I may, I need to actually set the scene a little, Chair, and then when I come with a question, it's back to my point. This isn't a time or a matter to be the subject of quick fire back and forth questions, I don't think. This is meant to be a searching inquiry and quite a solemn one so that we can move forward productively. And please, I will take the spirit of what this committee is meant to be formally, Chair, so I don't mean to go rogue on you, but I will insist that I say a little bit and then I will come to a question. Thank you. To take a stance that the government wasn't giving clarity and then was giving clarity will not serve us well going forward. Okay, in terms of relations with central government, there's something serious to repair here in our relations with government, whether we're looking for sponsorship, whether we're looking for funding, whether we're looking for grants, there's something serious to repair here. The second point I'd like to make is that there's something going back to the discourse that happened about what was in the budget paper at the start of the year, is that the reflection has got to be that there was something in that should have made super clear where there was clearly some ambiguity. So a check was made with KPMG, a check was made through SIPFA, and one would think that would be okay. But clearly in hindsight, it wasn't okay. And there is something, given the seriousness of what's happened now, that should have been made emphatically clear when we were relying on it to balance the budget. And it wasn't there, and that's going to be a serious lesson taken forward, I think. If it's a question, would the leader agree? Would Cabinet agree with that comment? But let me just finish the whole thing. The second part of what I'm going to say, as well as the whole thing about meeting of minds and explicit agreements, is about disclosure. And this is the second thing, and I'm going to ask, is there an agreement about this learning going forward? Is that what has compounded this whole issue is the lack of disclosure around it. And we had the last meeting, whatever we'll call it, the last ONS meeting, and having no reports and so on. But even before then, the ability to engage in this subject, and I'll speak personally, has been minimal. To get into it, to actually understand, and to try and be constructive as well throughout all of this. I felt unable to do all of that, even in my previous role as well, unable to do any of that. And I'm willing to believe that this has not served this council well, not only with this committee, with the wider councillor group, wider with residents, and most certainly with central government as well, and a wider group of stakeholders. So here's my question, Chair. Thank you for prompting me. One is, what, leader, will be your reflections, please, on, first of all, having emphatic, clear, simple agreements on things before we embark on things, and secondly, about disclosure throughout the process rather than, let's say, towards the end. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, can you just repeat the first question, first of those two questions?
Yeah, it was sort of a more circumspect question, please, which is about what is his stance about having almost going the extra mile to make sure there are explicit agreements with yourself, Cabinet, with other councillors and with central government to make super clear that there is a meeting of minds on everything, rather than just kind of the formalities or the sort of the sort of in documentation. Oh, there's agreement, but really making sure there's agreement. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And a number of things in that, and I don't disagree with many of them. So absolutely, I do think there's a point here about reflecting on the process, and in terms of the I guess openness and how we've delivered that. But if you look to where we get to now, when we've got real clarity, you see every report we've received. You see an opportunity to have a decent scrutiny session. You see me here in front of you to answer questions about it. So I think we've got where we needed to get to. How we've got there, I'd absolutely reflect on that. You talk about something I wanted to sort of come back on, was you talk about the ambiguity in the original budget paper, and that's the bit I don't agree on, because I actually don't think there was ambiguity in it. I think it was really clear that we'd had that the Beach Hut SPV was something we tested with multiple leaders in terms of local government finance, including our external auditor, including SIPFA, and was clearly allowed. What the ambiguity, that's what's eventually happened has been government has changed the rules, so it's not allowed. So I think we were absolutely clear on what we were trying to do. We were very transparent about it. Before we put it in our budget, we'd gone and spoken to Grant Thornton and SIPFA and KPMG to do that. So I think we have been clear and reasonable. But I think we need to reflect. But we need to also reflect on why are we doing that? What's our standing in local government? Well, today, I've received a letter from the minister saying he's absolutely supportive, in principle, of our ability to borrow for transformation. So it's challenging in terms of our financial strategy. I get that, I understand that, but he's going to deliver for us. So something that this council has wanted to do since 2019 and hasn't been able to do. And we have been able to do that through our direct discussions with government. So this entire process has led us to a way to borrow for transformation that is entirely positive for this area, because it means we don't have to sell surplus unsurplus assets, and it means we can borrow and spread that cost of those out over a number of years. So we aren't trying to do something normal. We set back-to-back council tax freezes. If you want, and bluntly, if we want a leader who's going to be doing, just bog standard, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to be an entirely member-led authority. I'm trying to speak to government regularly and change and influence how the local government funding, regime, occurs. And we are. We are at the vanguard of LGR. This is the most complex piece of local government reorganisation that's happened in a generation. We've already successfully saved £50 million a year, and we're going to save a further £50 million. So we're not trying to do something normal. If we're going to break some eggs doing that, I'm happy with that. But I will absolutely and genuinely reflect on your comments around how open and how transparent it is. My view, has been, let's get the information. Let's see where we are. We're trying to negotiate. We don't know until we've got something. We couldn't discuss it. Perhaps that was wrong. Perhaps we should have just, tried to have more of an open and transparent discussion earlier, and I'll reflect on that. So apologies. I've actually now gone off on a bit of a long run. So could you just help me? Have I not answered any of your questions specifically?
Councillor Aying.
Actually, yeah, if I may. Thank you. I think on the first one, I think just what I think we've heard is appropriate. Sort of, there is something there to reflect on the being super clear on agreements. I must, for the record, again, Leader, you repeated this. The government changed the rules. It's my absolute earnest, what's the right word? Advice, plea to you that is a stance that will not serve this council well at all going forward, with potentially a new Prime Minister and a new cabinet going forward from Monday, an insistence that the government change the rules on us. My feeling from what I've seen and heard, they did not. This was a situation, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, is that one can only write any rules to a certain level of precision, and then those rules get tested by behaviours at the margins, and those behaviours generally are not welcomed. And this is why we have words such as not in the spirit of what was written. And that's something that we've got to have good acuity about when is it we are behaving in the spirit of what was intended, because this is how we build and keep relationships with people who are important to us, and not by doing things which are the opposite of that. Anyway, I've made my point, enough said on that. I think the second one, Leader, if you could just say a bit more about the lesson to be learned about the disclosure throughout the process, because I can't help feeling we are where we are with this style of discussion because of the disclosure being so low and late in the day. Any comment on that, please?
Yeah, comment on both of them. So in terms of your first point, I agree. We've had the meeting, and Graham Tharrant was there as well with Greg Clark. When I met him in London, it was really clear. Effectively, said, "Look, come and use our team. Come and work. You have open access to our team to work through this with us going forward." We were of the view historically, but what we had to do was to get some external assurance, so that we, our Section 151 councillors, could rely on the fact that it was, what we were doing was in the regulations. That's what we did. His preferred approach, which is really well received by us, and evidence in the fact that we've now, in that short period of time, delivered, or in the process of delivering, the capitalisation direction that we've got. Come and work with us. You don't need to go through KPMG. Come and test it. Build those relationships. So I've heard that, and I've heard that really clearly. I did apologise directly to Greg Clark if our process to get to there wasn't well received historically, and I've said that we're in absolutely the right place to build those relationships. I do not believe that, that the work that they've done with our officers, myself in the last month over summer recess to deliver a capitalisation direction in principle at record pace would have happened if they hadn't believed that we were really keen on building those long-term relationships with them going forward. The point about disclosure. Look, I think it's a learning curve. I think this is a council that has been, we've now had 3 votes of no confidence. That create our peer review. I think used the word toxic in terms of atmosphere across our councillor base. I absolutely think that in a position where we are more open, transparent, and trusting, that culture would change and move forward. I think that's something I need to lead on, and I hear that, but I don't think that's something that's completely in my gift. I've been called a liar this evening and then been told, quite clearly that I haven't lied. We haven't had an apology about that. So I think there's a two-way, cross-councillor piece around trust, culture, reflection, and I really hope that in the last few months of this council and then going forward into the next council, all members can reflect on the type of culture that and the type of politics we should be having here. So I'm reflecting. I hope everybody else is.
Thank you, Leader. Now, I know Councillor Bartlett wants to come back with a very quick question, and I think Councillor Farquhar also wants to come back with a quick question. I'm also aware that there are a couple of people online. I did say at the beginning that we would go to the people online last. So Councillor Cox, I believe, wants to ask a question. So that's 3 in the room, 2 online, and then I think we need to move. And Councillor Dedman. So that's everybody virtually. So then we'll move on to the second meeting after that. So first of all, Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to disclosure. I've had a letter copied to me from a resident, which gives in great detail why the KPMG reports were withheld from council members illegally. And the letter is addressed to the monitoring officer, but I would just like to get some feedback as to if there was any feedback on the content of that letter at this point, because it does relate directly to the 3 KPMG reports that were withheld until just recently.
Who would you like a reply from?
Yeah, from the monitoring officer, if I may.
Okay. Monitoring officer.
I'm afraid I'm not quite sure what the question is, Councillor Bartlett. Are you asking me which report wasn't withheld and when?
The 3 KPMG reports.
Yes.
That related in part to the, in fact, the reports that we've now seen attached to the agenda.
Yes.
And Mr. Gateshaw, local resident, has gone into huge detail about the illegality of withholding those reports that have been requested specifically by council members, notwithstanding the understanding that they would not have been available for a freedom of information request, but they should have been allowed to be disclosed to members of this committee and indeed council members. Now, it may be he's wrong. I don't know. I'm not a legal person, but it certainly goes into some depth about the legal case, why they should have not been disclosed. And I'm just wondering if you're in a position to be able to give us a response to his letter at this point. You may not be, in which case we can wait. But I just wanted to raise it because a resident has actually specifically written to the council about it and has copied me into the correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I've not seen the letter in detail, Councillor Bartlett, so I can't respond to what Mr. Gattrell may have put in that letter. He did write a letter to me earlier in the week, to which I responded that I would not be able to reply until after the Air Festival because I'm on gold, for example, for the Air Festival and needed to prepare for this meeting. What I can say, however, is that we have a very detailed timeline about when each report came in and at what point KPMG released those reports for general disclosure. Now, even though those reports may have not been disclosable under FOI, while they were still the documents in the ownership under data protection law of the sender or the author, we wouldn't have been at liberty to disclose them because we would have needed the consent of the author, i.e. KPMG. So there's a combination of the consent of the author under data protection law and FOI and the right of councillors to have particular information at particular times. And I'm happy to go through that detail with you outside of this meeting if you would like me to. Thank you.
No, I'll wait. Thank you, Councillor Officer. Thanks very much. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to my colleague here, Councillor Iyengar, for changing the pitch and the tone of this particular discussion. And I appreciate that the Councillor Mellor is going to reflect on what has brought us to this very serious position as a council as a whole. I actually have two questions, but Councillor Bartlett raised a matter of a resident sharing a letter with him about the concerns that he has. I also am not very au fait with the procedures of local government and the legislation and so on and so forth. So if I may I address this to the Section 151 officer, just for clarity, because I think many people actually observing this broadcast either live or a later date may be lost, as I am, by some of the terminology which you use. So may I read from this letter? I have sought the permission of the resident to read it out.
Please do.
Thank you, Chair. However, there are various questions that I would like an answer for. First of all, what is the Section 151 officer doing in this matter? Have they contacted the professional body SIPFA about this matter? Has the ISAB been contacted about the mixing of capital expenditure and revenue expenditure? If the accounts are not going to be signed off, are the leaders of the council going to be liable? Will anyone be fined or sent to prison? When are the auditors going to get involved in the process? And will the Serious Fraud Office get involved? So I'm quite happy to repeat any of those questions if the Section 151 officer didn't quite get them.
I do think we've probably drifted into the next meeting, but
if I may, then I'll share it with the next meeting. May I ask the question which I was originally going to?
I think it's probably worth asking now, as you've asked it.
Thank you. I'm sure the resident who's watching will appreciate that, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, if I may then take the opportunity to respond to that. I think, as we've discussed previously tonight, the budget report very clearly indicates that we did consult SIPFA Consultancy in order to get that independent assurance on the validity of including the assumptions within the budget for 22-23. We also sought the assurances of the external auditor as part of that process, and as quoted within the budget report, their early, without prejudice feedback was that it was reasonable to produce a budget on that basis, and to produce a budget based on the financial accounting assumptions that were outlined as part of that process. I think probably that's the extent to which I can answer that question, because I think the rest of it probably isn't appropriate to respond to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My original question, again, in the spirit of the Councillor Iyengar and changing the tone, I must say that I was somewhat frustrated by the number of party political broadcast that Councillor Mellor has managed to squeeze into this actual meeting. So I hope we won't see a repeat of that, because Councillor Mellor has indicated that he will reflect on the nature of actually how he addresses this committee and indeed the residents who are watching. My question is this. Councillor Mellor actually referred to a letter from the Minister, Paul Scully, that was published in the Echo 3 hours ago. My question, and I'm conscious of it, I may just get the letter up. Just give me one moment, if you please, Chair. My question relates to the fact that Councillor Mellor said that this latest letter, it was absolutely supportive. The Minister was absolutely supportive in the nature of the letter, and the capitalist direction was proceeding at pace. Now, my question is threefold. So I can see by the fact that it is addressed to Councillor Mellor. My question is this. Has it been shared with his cabinet? Has it been shared with his cabinet? Has it been shared? And it has, well, my question essentially in a nutshell is this, and I can understand 34 weeks away from a local election, why we have to fight political broadcasts. But my question specifically is this. It's who shared that letter to the Daily Echo? And was that done before it was actually shared with his own cabinet?
Do you want to answer that, Councillor Mellor?
I don't know who shared that letter with the Daily Echo, and as I've said, we have an informal discussion every Monday. Well, actually, that's not true. We haven't done it over the summer, but we will be having informal discussions going forward, and that's when I tend to update cabinet, and I will update each other.
And I won't bother you by reading the letter because I think the public can read it online. I'd just like a follow-up question is, what part of the letter's contents, which appear to be published in full in the Echo, gives the Councillor Mellor the absolute the idea that this government and that minister is absolutely supportive of?
This is actually part of the second meeting, so okay. I think you hold that back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question follows on really from Councillor Iyengar's plea, I suppose, for openness and transparency, and also Councillor Bartlett's comment about the letter that we was receiving from Philip Gattrell, and that is to try and find out who stopped the opposition councillors having access to this KPMG reports, because these KPMG reports, as it's very clear, was fundamental to the budget, which we all sat round and had to vote on. They were fundamental, and we were denied access to that. And it's very clear from Mr. Gattrell's letter that actually this is in direct contravention of section 100F of the 1972 Local Government Act, and that is wrong. And I want to know who stopped, which person, was it an officer, was it the monitoring officer, was it the leader, who actually decided, no, they're not entitled to that. And if please don't quote the Data Protection Act, because that's irrelevant in these circumstances. And so I want to know who actually stopped opposition councillors having access to that report.
Well, I'm looking around. Councillor Mellor, do you want to answer that?
I'm absolutely clear that we've had an exemplary team of officers, and at any point that either letters from ministers or reports need to be in the public domain, but they absolutely will be. So I'm happy with our comments on this. If officers would like to comment, they're welcome.
Mr. Farrant, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think only as far as I'd refer the Council to the Council's Constitution, which contains the provision for when and how reports may be released.
Thank you. Councillor Dedman.
There is a legal right for councillors to have information, particularly when it comes to the budget. No councillor can do their financial duty on terms of the budget if they do not have access to information which is fundamental to that budget. If the Constitution is telling us...
Councillor Cox, can you do it through the chair next time?
I beg your pardon. Thank you. Through you, sir. If the council officers are saying that we can't have access to this detailed information, then the Constitution is wrong, and if that's being used as the excuse, it's utterly wrong, because we cannot make decisions. We cannot make decisions on the budget, which is the most fundamental part of what we do every year, without information. And this was a fundamental piece of information which we asked for before the budget. We were refused, and we've been refused for months on end since. It's been like dragging, I don't know what the expression is, but it's like pulling teeth trying to get this information, and it's appalling. It's taken so long. And somebody decided, and I want to know who. Was it the monitoring officer that decided? Was it the leader that decided that we couldn't have it?
Chief Executive.
Oh, can I come in first, Chair, for you? Is that okay?
Yeah, please do.
I'm entirely aware that it is not in my gift to say when things happen. We have a constitution that says as and when we should have things it can happen. It shouldn't be in my gift to see what's in the public domain, and it isn't. You know, it quite clearly isn't. So we rely on our team. We rely on our constitution, and as we've seen this evening with the myriad of reports and letters that have been published, we're ready to be and absolutely fully transparent, because that's exactly what we need to be doing.
John, I'm happy to hand over to the monitoring officer, but I do regret the councillor's accusatory tone, and can I just remind the committee it is now September. If it were a matter of legal recourse for setting the budget, councillors set the budget in February. It is very disappointing to have this level of accusation in this meeting without any prior notice, and the tone, I believe. I understand we've had discussions about the release of the reports, but I think we've answered as many of those as we can. I personally haven't had that question from Councillor Cox, but I'll have to bring in the monitoring officer.
Thank you, monitoring officer.
Chair, thank you. I just wanted to beg your pardon, Chair, is it okay for me to speak? I just wanted to say that there are a number of factors informing a legal view, and my position as the monitoring officer and as the Director Law and Governance for this authority is to provide advice. I don't necessarily make rulings on absolutely everything, but the advice would have been, and if there is a requirement of me to explain myself in writing once I know all the allegations that are being made against me, I will happily do so. But the considerations I took into account were, first of all, the statutory right of councillors to have access to certain information. Then there is a common law right. Then there is the access to information rules in the Constitution. And then there are various circumstances under which the leader may make a determination that a draft document should not be released at that time. All of those matters are complex. It depends on exactly the day on which they're asked and the day on which they're answered. So I really I don't want you to feel as though I'm deflecting any answers here today. Very happy to give a detailed answer on a detailed set of facts. But generally speaking, as a rule, when a piece of advice comes into the authority in draft, it's unwise for the authority to widely disseminate that at that time, because it could change. And a lot of work might happen based on a draft that never becomes a final proposal or never becomes a final document. That's why also under, Councillor Slade, also under data protection law, and I'm sorry to refer to it again, there is an opportunity for not only councils, but all organizations to deliberate amongst themselves before they formulate a final proposal. So all of those things would have been taken into consideration when I gave advice. Thank you.
I think everybody's had a fair airing here. I think it's about time we moved on to the second meeting. Councillor Dedman can have. Councillor Dedman, you have the last question.
With respect, Mr. Chair, asked to attend, I'd be grateful. I have a very short question.
Yeah, and me.
Councillor Butt, thank you. My question is extremely short, Mr. Chairman, but you are holding the meeting. If you do not wish me to ask a question, then I will demur. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'd be happier if all the questions were held over for the next meeting, which I'm pretty sure ought to have started an hour ago.
Chair,
So,
Mr. Chairman, could we have some quick resolution on this? If we were to keep our questions extremely short, or observations extremely short, could we please just be indulged and then move on? Because my observation, Mr. Chairman, is not about the next item. Thank you so much.
Okay, if that is true of all three of you, I'll let you ask your questions after Councillor Denman. So we'll come back to you. Councillor Denman.
Right, I really appreciate it, Chairman. Thank you so much. And I just want to make one point before I come to the questions. The leader has been saying that how privileged we are to have this special extra meeting. And in fact, if we hadn't had this committee cut down to size so much, it wouldn't have to be an extra meeting, would it? We would have just had normal meetings of the board. Second point, which has come from this particular meeting of the committee, the leader has been saying, oh, the sale of assets, how terrible. It was part of the local government reorganisation plan. I can see the leader immediately rushing to his iPad. That was exactly why Christchurch did not want to enter, because everything was going to be sold. This was a Conservative plan, and this is why Christchurch became independent. On a second question, no, that wasn't a question, but the question that I really have, which is total minutiae, Chairman, and I'm very sorry to bring this up, if I can even find it. There is nobody else from Christchurch on this committee. You have been talking about the KPMG reports, which either did or did not exist. I was told at one point they did not exist. I now know they did exist, but they weren't perhaps in the right format. In one of the reports, which we now have copies of, there's a list of capital projects, which is this exciting new thing that we are going to be doing for transformation, for reforming the councils. And in that report, it states, Christchurch Civic Centre will be partly maintained for mayoral services and the coroner. Now, my question is that correct? My answer to myself is no.
Councillor Denman, this is actually nothing to do with beach huts.
It is to do with beach huts because it's the KPMG report, Chairman. And I'm just going to say, if they've got that wrong, can we rely on any information that they gave us? And the other point that I want to make, which is really to the leader, can the leader agree that councillors and residents have been kept in the dark over this whole SPV situation, which again, since there's been a lot of political sayings, the Christchurch independents were totally against the SPV from the start. Can he guarantee that this lack of transparency to residents and councillors will not happen again? And that is a question for the leader. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Leader, if you want to come back.
I look forward to it, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, Councillor, you said that it was the original plan, the plan to sell assets. That's why the Christchurch independents weren't keen on this. So it's not my plan. It's never been my plan, and it's never been this administration's plan to sell assets. I really can't be clearer, and I think I am genuinely boring people when I'm saying you heard from your leader of the Unity Alliance when you're a member of cabinet that the plan, your plan.
With respect, leader, it was local government reorganisation plan, which all of your Conservative councillors bought into under John Beasley. Thank you, Chairman. I don't think I need to hear the rest.
Well, I think, Chair, I would like to have the opportunity to reply. This administration, under my leadership, came really clearly and said we rejected the Unity Alliance's plan. We rejected Leslie Dedman, who was on that Cabinet's plan, which we just heard again iterated this evening, was to sell off assets and then also to use reserves to fund transformation. We reject that. My administration, my leadership has rejected that. And what we've done is we've come up with a new plan that allows us to put those reserves and resources into council tax freezes, back-to-back council tax freezes. We've led the country in that £11 million in people's pockets. That number goes up every year, millions of pounds every year, not collected from our taxpayers. And we're not selling assets. And what we've now delivered, as in today, is support in terms of what we'd originally asked for, which was the ability to borrow for transformation. So we've delivered. We are delivering. I appreciate, and I do, and I, you know, Councillor Enger's comments, I genuinely take on board and reflect on how we've got here. But in terms of delivery, in terms of, you know, inheriting somebody else's plan, what we've done is we've turned around your plan. You know, you talk, but it was because your leaders just said it was your plan, and you're a member of her cabinet.
Councillor Dedman, thank you.
Okay, a few other points in that as well. You know, so you talked about, you know, the Christchurch Civic Centre, and I'll add the Paul Civic Centre to that as well. We've heard your plan was to sell surplus assets, and again, I've heard me say that's not our plan. So effectively, what we've asked Future Places to do is to look at both those sites and look at how we can bring them forward for community benefit and our long-term financial sustainability. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what I look forward to delivering, because I do not believe those buildings should be sold for the residents of Paul, and I do not believe that building should be sold because it should be used for the residents of Christchurch. We are fighting to retain our assets and deliver low council tax, and we are delivering it, and I'm really proud of that. And the last thing I would, in terms of your question or statements, Councillor Dedman, you say you were not in favour of the pre-2019 plan to sell assets. You also say you're not in favour of our plan in terms of how we're funding transformation. You're not in favour of how we were looking to use the beach up thing. What are you in favour of? What are the Christchurch Independents in favour of? Because ultimately we are delivering low tax small government, and you know, and that's something I'm really proud of. You don't want to sell assets, but you don't want to borrow to fund transformation either. How can you deliver any of that if you're not either investing in transformation, selling assets, or raising those funds elsewhere? We've delivered on cleaner, greener, safe. We've delivered, you know, millions of pounds on that. We've delivered millions of pounds on summer response. We've delivered a huge amount of extra, you know, CSS officers. You know, we are, and we've done that whilst freezing council tax. So, you know, we are delivering. In Christchurch, it's a really good example. Over £200 on a Bandy house average. Our council tax is now different from what it would have been under, you know, if we got the Dorset council tax at the moment. So I'm proud of our record, and I'm very happy to stand up for it. Thank you.
Well, now, we'll move online now. Can we speed this up? Can I have the three online contributors ask their questions one after the other, and then the people answering can come back afterwards? So we'll start with Councillor Howell.
Not ladies first, then.
Thank you. I'm actually the councillor who asked for the KPMG report to be released and was denied that. And it seems like both the leader and I thought initially the monitoring officer had forgotten the reason why that was denied. As the monitoring officer later said, the only reason, in fact, nothing to do with data protection or those other issues were ever mentioned. It was because the leader may exercise his right under the Constitution to deny publication to councillors because it was in draft form. I presume the leader will stand by that statement, because that's the statement I have from the monitoring officer in an email. So my question is, given that the reports that we have, the first two reports that we have were in a form which is roughly the same as they are today. I understand that very minimal changes have been made to them. What was the reason that justified withholding of the draft report? We as councillors should have been entitled and given the information to all the information to make proper decisions. You know, it seems very strange to me that the leader denied us that report when that report was substantially in the form that it is in now, you know, please can he enlighten us? Thank you.
Can we take Councillor Hadley's question next?
Thank you. Yes, I have two questions actually. The first, the party political broadcast from the leader, and he talks about cleaner, greener, safer, and the summer response didn't actually drag any more cars away than we had previous years. But the question was, does he really believe that that was more important than harmonising the staff terms and conditions, which is running a year behind? And has also led to enormous unhappiness amongst the members of staff working for this authority.
Yes, this related to beach huts.
Well, yeah, okay, and but he's giving that in responses, and also the fact that he's happy to quadruple the debt level in order to make his savings. I just think there's an enormous problem there. But in terms of the beach huts reports, the question, I guess, we've had something around the consent of the authors, but the previous speakers talked about the real reason why it was withheld was a choice from the leader. How are they actually procured? Because there seems to be nothing in there about procurement. This is a significant amount of money. It's £120,000 that's been spaffed up the wall in order to get this advice, which we were now told is dodgy, and that the all of the consulting bodies have been told not to do this sort of thing. So where is the evidence of how it's procured? And also, why did we not insist that information was made available as we choose as a council, as part of our commissioning of the KPMG reports? Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm absolutely certain that the leader will agree that Open Scrutiny provides a critical friend challenge of the executive, external authorities and agencies as well. And that we have to reflect that voice and the concerns of the public and its communities. And also that this approach should really deliver and make an impact on future delivery of our public services. So that said, which I feel is the bricks and bones of overview and scrutiny, we had a presentation from Councillor Nyenga, which was lauded by several colleagues. And this sits around engagement, the engagement that was required to ensure that people were aware of what was going on. And I think there was some small failing in some people's eyes and some large failings in other people's eyes. So surely, as we are versed to find resolutions as to what may have happened in the past and go forward, and not unfortunately be sitting in where we have been sat today, listening to some of the comments which were less than laudable, and this is a public meeting and I'm sitting remotely listening to this. Can we please take this forward as to how we better iterate within our constitutional provision as to what we would do in a situation that we've just been through? How would we change things? How would we improve things? What can we learn from it? What lessons can we learn from it? And how can we take it forward as a caring council who is basically there to serve our residents? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm extremely grateful for your time.
Not sure there's much to do with beach huts there, but thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mello, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will do. In terms of Councillor Howe's question, absolute clarity. I did not deny this council the ability to see that report was being referenced. I think we've heard really clearly about the timeline of when those reports and what those reports were relating to. I absolutely at no time have been at the liberty to disclose that report. We've heard why, and also it wasn't finished, as well, So I think that's another pretty good reason. I categorically deny the fact that I've ever had the ability to disclose that report and haven't. In terms of Councillor, but I do think that related to the beach huts, because I think what I got from that was a real reflection on where we are now and why we are here, and I think that's absolutely the right thing we need to do. So similar point to Councillor Anger, and I welcome that. That said, and I have to, I think it's a constitutional issue. Let's reflect on that. But it's a cultural issue. It's how do we, talk to each other? How do we conduct political discourse across BCP? That is absolutely something I need to lead on. But if we reflect on some of the things that's been said today, we've heard lies, we've heard quotes about saying, illegal withholding of reports. That's unhelpful when it's directed at officers. We need to take more responsibility for raising the bar of our discussion.
discussion, and I'm, you know, and I would, and that's not something I can do on our own. In terms of Andy Hadley, Councillor Hadley's points, were not one of them was remotely related to the beach huts. I would ask him to also reflect on his use of language, because I think if I heard him correctly, that was really quite unnecessary. And again, you know, it was living in his post-truth environment where you can talk about, you know, the fact that many more cars weren't taken off the road illegally parked than under the UA. Absolutely, it's completely wrong. You know, talk to us about debt not quadrupling and our savings. It's a fact. It's an absolute fact, but you just don't believe it. We brought in the ability to do that, and. Okay, it's just, yeah. So I really appreciate your comments, Councillor Slade. I'm factually correct, and my record and our record will stand on that. Your record for a summer was appalling.
Right, I'm going to end now with the recommendation.
Sorry, I didn't get a
it's recommended that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes that the Council is no longer pursuing the commercialisation of the beach hut assets via an SPV. So do we note? So note. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against. They're not. No. Okay. Any against or any abstentions?
If I may, Chair, Councillor Farquhar, I abstain, and I'd like my abstention recorded for the minutes.
Sorry, Chair, but I thought Councillor Hadley asked questions about the procurement of KPMG, which was completely about the beach huts, and didn't get any of those questions answered. They were specifically.
Thank you, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, well,
I was waiting to
come back afterwards. We've now.
But you're closing the meeting. How can he come back afterwards?
With the next meeting.
But and you're going to let us talk about KPMG in the second meeting, are you?
No, I'm not actually.
So you're not allowing answers
no,
on the KPMG procurement?
Yeah, we're in the middle of a vote. So if
for clarity, you are not allowing Councillor Hadley's response about the KPMG procurement to be answered, and you are not allowing us to ask the questions in the second meeting. I will therefore be writing with Councillor Hadley to the Echo to ask those questions publicly, and I look forward to you replying in the Echo, or alternatively perhaps an officer may wish to do so, because the member asked the question properly and you've refused to allow him to ask about procurement. £120,000 of council money spat up the wall.
We are actually in the middle of a vote. Now you've chosen not to vote, so I suggest that was carried.
Chairman, just for clarity, I had 5 votes in favour of the move. Can I just clarify, are there any votes against that move? And are there any votes abstaining? Abstaining. Thank you.
Abstaining.
Thank you.
Councillor
Bartlett and Councillor Iyengar.
Councillor Farquhar, you were abstaining. Yeah? You were abstaining.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, right. And this has been recorded for the minutes.
Yeah.
Chair, can I just clarify for all those members that have abstained, do you want your votes recorded?
Yes, please.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. That ends the first meeting. I suggest we take a 5-minute recess.